How many of our life experiences lead us to this culminating moment that it's almost awing?
But this whole journey really started when I was a kid because I've always been interested in helping people.
I literally have, I can't explain it. It's like a cascade of really just, it's love. Hello and welcome, practitioners. We're back here with the Thriving Holistic Practitioner podcast. Today is another amazing guest episode. With us today is Hilary Russo, who's the founder of HIListically Speaking and the Hug It Out method. And I forgot to ask you, where are you coming in from? What part of the world?
I'm in the tri-state area in New York, New Jersey, physically planted right at this moment in New Jersey.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I'm grateful for your presence here.
Really happy to be here, Lindsay. Thank you for the invitation.
Absolutely. Well, we've already done a lot of meet and greet, but I can't wait to share with the audience a little bit about you and how you got on this path of holistic medicine and just developing the Hug It Out method. Like, I'm excited to hear about that story, but let's start with your roots. How did you get into this space to begin with?
Oh boy, life is a falling into. I always say that. Like everything, what do they say? If you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans, right? I started out in this field as a journalist. I've been a journalist for over 30 years. I still am. I'm a health journalist now. I just fine tuned what I wanted to do and the kind of stories that I want to share because I saw for 30 years being in the world of media that I was already holding space for people to share their stories. I was just doing it in a way where once I had their story, I was broadcasting it out. How it differs from what I do in the practitioner world and holistic health world is that I have them share their stories and then they broadcast in. It's really the same thing, it's just a different frequency, right? But this whole journey really started when I was a kid because I've always been interested in helping people. My dad was very sick my whole life. And I always have been around health and wellness, but didn't really quite know how I wanted to use that in my own life to be healthy here first, because this is your temple first, before I could help others. I didn't know what I was doing there. My whole goal was to stay in media. And I think what happened was after my father passed when I was 29, it was right before right after 9/11, my father passed. And I was already working in the news business. I was on air during 9/11. And I didn't have tools to know how to deal with the aftermath of that. Most people didn't. And that is secondary traumatic stress. You know, when you're taking in the upsets of what other people have been feeling on a primary level. So that kind of moved me into thinking like, how do I want to work on my own emotional well-being? And it was a series of events really, because after that happened, I wound up working with a company that is the company I wound up graduating from in the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. I became a health coach, but prior to becoming a health coach, I was one of the educational educators in the modules, the online modules. And I thought to myself, gosh, this is really amazing how they are dealing with the holistic approach of living, you know, the whole body approach. And I thought, I'm going to come back here one day. I'm not really sure how. And long story short, I wound up getting certified in the program, and that moved me into the field of holistic health. And, you know, it keeps blossoming from there, you know?
It sure does, especially when we finally get on our path that is
Mhm.
divinely timed. For example, it just unfolds and it's kind of fun to watch actually. I understand. That's neat. So when you got certified, was that still close to around 9/11, or was that a few years later?
No, it was years later. I think there were a series of events that happen in your life and you start really questioning. You get, you know, you reach different decades in your life and different experiences. And it wasn't until a number of years later where I was still working full time as an on camera personality, a journalist, because that's my background as far as like being a news anchor and a host. And once I was hired, it really opened up my eyes to, wow, this is a really incredible way of living, you know, this holistic approach to living. You know, you have to be your own healthcare advocate first, And then from that, it was a series of events. I wound up being cast on a live streaming fitness show. It was the first fitness show of its kind called Daily Burn 365. And I was given a health coach during that time to help me on my own health journey, while I was also somebody that thousands of people saw every day while they were working out, because it was kind of like the Today Show of fitness. We were working out, we had a host, I was a backup host, but I was always that person in the classroom as the cameras were on us that people got to know us. And there was also a community element to it. And I thought community is the way we really heal. Building a community, building your tribe, as they call it, a collective. And from that, I decided I think I want to go on this health coaching journey. If not only to learn more about how to live holistically, also be there as someone that can be supporting others and helping them on their journey, being the guide by their side. And from that, sometime not too far after that, after getting certified in integrative nutrition and being on Daily Burn, I wound up meeting a young lady at a birthday party at a bar in New York City that was or is still the COO of the Havening Techniques organization. And that in itself was the game changer, life changer for me in the work that I do today.
Okay, so we have a lot to unpack there. I'm making some
Yeah.
notes.
There's never one story, but these are just, it is a series of events that lead you to where you are. And one thing I always tell my clients is be open to possibilities, because the path you are really choosing, this linear path, really has a lot of little branches. And be open to what comes to you, because really life is a falling into. Things do come your way if you're open to the possibilities.
Yeah, so true. And it's also interesting. I think after hearing so many stories and even thinking of my own, how many of our life experiences lead us to this culminating moment that it just
Mhm.
seems so kismet. It's almost awing. It definitely makes you realize that there's a bigger plan and a bigger purpose, however you believe it to come to be. It's just so cool to see how the tapestry weaves. And then you're like, whoa, I didn't know that, for me, I was in not journalism, but I was a rodeo queen for many years. And so I did a lot of
Wow.
public speaking and I did a lot of media because I was the media person for that rodeo.
Mhm.
And it's interesting how that came to be important in the role I play as a podcaster and just what I found as a love of mine, then how I'm able to leverage that in my business. Like little things that you don't think are going to add up turn into something important later on. It's so neat to watch how that goes.
And look, the podcasting, talking about that, the Holistically Speaking podcast, I never imagined it would be where it is today. And it was a conversation I had with a really dear friend of mine from my days back in being a professional theater actor, that I had a conversation with him. He worked at Google at the time. He was starting his own podcast network, which is now one of the biggest broadcasting podcast networks out there. And he said, "You need a podcast." He's like, "You need a podcast in the health and wellness space." And I was like, I don't know. But I've covered every area of media in my 30 years on this, at this time, it was 30 years working in media. He's like, "Yeah, you need this. You need to be the voice." And for me, voice and connection, I've always said, are my superpowers. So when I launched the Holistically Speaking podcast back in 2020, which I was talking about it before there even was a pandemic, when we finally launched it during the pandemic, it was like the most amazing journey. It was my heart's work, right? My mission to want to share health and well-being with the world and have these conversations, these powerful conversations, and where we are now to be in the top percent of podcasts globally. I never imagined that. It was just a place to have conversations.
And it is, and it's cool because it can serve on all levels. Like one of the things
Yeah.
I love about podcasting is like you don't have to be in the 1%, although that is cool. Congratulations.
No, you really don't. There's something for everyone. I never
Yeah.
imagined that. That was never on the path or the mission. But I think it's just having those authentic conversations. And not every podcast is a conversation either. It might just be a conversation between you and the audience. I do solo episodes too. There's so many different ways to do it. And it's such a different it's so different in the world of media. I've never experienced anything like it. And with the independent podcaster, which is the majority of us, it's a club in its own, like very close knit. People are very much about helping you out. And when I spoke this last year or in January on at Podfest Expo, it was like going to camp. Everyone is just in a great mood, and it's a great way to connect with people
So
and
true.
learn new things.
Yes. It's so true. So I want to point out for anyone listening,
Yeah.
that's why I brought up, like, it doesn't matter what stage you're in. Hilary has been doing her podcast since the pandemic or just before. I'm just launching. What's so cool is, like, it doesn't matter how new you are at it. It's going to benefit you in some way. It could be building connections. It could
Mhm.
be having an outlet. Like, one other benefit too is a lot of times holistic practitioners and wellness practitioners find themselves saying the same thing to clients over and over again, right? Well, if you have a podcast, a library of information, how easy is it to just text them an episode versus
Oh, I do that all the time.
over and
All
over
the time.
again, right? It's a strategy on so many levels. It's so cool. Yes, it's a great one.
And And not even my own podcast because it is a collaboration. Anytime I have a guest on my show, I'm like, oh, you need to know about like feng shui. I just did an amazing episode with feng shui masters Marie Diamond. Or, oh, you're curious about the blue zones. I actually talked to Dan Butner on my podcast on episode 66. So like it's sharing other people as well. But you're right. It's a great way to share that you're an authority in what you do. You
Yes.
are able to have these conversations. And I will say that the podcast definitely leveled me up. And look, I'm a girl who is an award winning media personality anyway, but that's that. That's the past, right? It's about the now and it's about building the connections. It's about letting people know that you are hearing them, you want them to share their thoughts. If they have, I make it very, very obvious to my listeners and my audience. If you have an idea that you want me to cover, if you want me to cover something in holistic well-being or trauma, because it's basically trauma to triumph stories through health, healing, and humor, right? Holistically speaking. And I want them to be part of the action. I want them to be a producer in a way, And sometimes I even share their voices on the show.
Absolutely. It's so true. It's a great platform all the way around. And it's
Yeah, it
smart.
is.
It's probably, of all of the marketing strategies out there, it's one of the easiest to get started and one of the least expensive to get a global
It
reach.
is.
You really can't beat it on so many levels. So it's great.
It can also be a lot of time and knowing time management. It can also lead to being overwhelmed and burnout if you don't have a really well planned out way of doing it. Because if you don't have an editor, you're doing it yourself. If you're not putting time aside to actually record and put the episode together. So it does take strategy, you know, and time and really just understanding what is your why for doing it. I can't say that enough. Anything you do, what is your why, and how much time do you want to put aside and invest into it.
Right. Yes. And it can be very time consuming, especially in the beginning when you're learning the learning.
Yes.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
let's circle back to when you got certified
Mhm.
and you decided that you were ready to start helping people in this space. How did that work for you? I mean, you had a full-time job, you kind of were pursuing this more as a curiosity more than like a heartfelt, hardcore determination. Like, you didn't sound like you fully decided to pivot careers just yet. You were still kind of toe dipping. Um, what was that journey like for you during that time?
Well, I've been an entrepreneur since 2002. I walked away from the news desk within a year of 9/11. So I've been on the entrepreneurial path before most people were doing work from home remote, and when most of us started doing that in 2020, 2019, right? And so I've been self-employed that long, and I think part of it was a shift for me where I loved working in television and working on camera, but what can I do to share my message and my voice in a powerful way? So I also connected with QVC. I've been working on QVC as an on-air representative of products since 2011, 2012. And I thought, okay, I'm already in a different division now. I want to do health and wellness. So it was really kind of cherry picking certain things and building the brand. No, I don't want to sell solar lights anymore because that's what I first came on the air to sell because that's what was presented to me. Now I want to focus on health and wellness. So it was being very intentional about branding. It was about if people hire me to be their on camera presenter or if I'm being hired for media, I want to focus on health and wellness. So it was weeding out or crowding out, as we call it in holistic health, crowding out that which is not serving you to make room for that which is, right? So no longer was I doing stories about random topics or different kinds of products that didn't really support emotional or physical or holistic well-being. It was Hilary is the Holistically Speaking brand. This is what she works on. People start getting to know you and identify you. And I love when people say holistically over holistically. Sometimes, you hear them make that decision when they use the word, and I'm like, that's branding. You're saying my brand name, right? So it's building the brand, and I think part of that was not necessarily leaving a job. It was building something under the umbrella of the Holistically Speaking brand. And that meant bringing in different modalities like havening and hypnotherapy, really focusing on my speaking engagements about emotional well-being and secondary traumatic stress and trauma to triumph stories. Everything is basically under that umbrella and being extremely intentional about how you want to show up in this world. So people come to know you as an authority in that area.
Okay, let's talk about that. You are clearly the expert on building authority. Like of all
One
the
of
people
maybe.
well, in this case, and of other
Yeah.
people I've had on the podcast, I haven't had anybody who's pointing that out so strongly
Yeah.
because and who has done such an interesting job. Like what I'm intrigued by, here's what I'm intrigued by. When people think about branding,
Mhm.
most people think about what? A logo,
A logo, yeah, a name,
colors
but
on
you
a
have to,
website.
right.
You
And
know,
that's important,
it
but
is
that's not
important,
everything.
but you haven't touched on those things yet whatsoever. You're talking about branding from a whole different perspective. Now, some might say, well, Hillary, you already had it so easy. You were already in media. It was easy for you to just announce yourself. Like, was it though? That's the question. Like, did you feel, was there any doubt? Was there some sort of trepidation? Like, did you ever wonder, oh, well, if I niche myself down into the wellness space, does that mean that I'm limiting my opportunity? Did you ever second guess that? Was there any like, I don't know, vacillation happening for you at that
Oh
time?
my gosh. Absolutely. I mean, the inner bully lives on the playground in our minds more than anything. I mean, we are conditioned, our brain, our amygdala is a conditioned to fight or flight to survive. And I have to remind little Amy, the amygdala, you're okay, girl. You can do this. It's okay. But how long do you want to stay in the doubt? Or do you want to like use that energy for something good? And it's a constant reminder. I mean, we have like 50 to 70,000 thoughts a day. They can't all be good ones. And am I making a good decision? Should I get a job that's full time with benefits and go back into the full time corporate sector? And I'm not saying that's bad either. I mean, I've been in the corporate sector as well, even in the work that I do. But it it's really being open to surrendering and releasing and trusting your intuition because your higher self, and not to be woo woo, but your higher self knows what you need to do. And you can question things, but how long are you going to allow yourself to be on that wheel of questioning yourself and doubting yourself without taking the risk? Because what is it that Henry Ford said? If you always do what you always did, you always get what you always got. You stay in that place, you're not getting anywhere but where you were just a minute ago on that wheel turning around and around, right?
True.
So you got to step outside your comfort zone every once in a while,
Yeah.
you know?
And I think that's a theme that I see more in this podcast. So my last podcast was called The Freedom Entrepreneur. And I did that one for, I don't know, probably 4 years. And it was losing its luster because I was finding that people were coming onto the podcast with an agenda.
Mm,
And it was just very much, it was just a different vibe. Let me just say that. What I love about this podcast, what I love about guests like you is that we can admit and talk about and lean into the fact that entrepreneurship is a beautiful journey that unfolds. It has its own path, like we were just talking about earlier. And so it's cool when we can recognize that, and then we can accept that that is part of our journey. And so, yes, the next step might be just listening. And yes, we're okay with making some pivots and changes, and it's all good. It's all leading us towards that, like we talked about, the culminating point where you finally look back and go, oh, wow, that makes sense. Now I see why I learned that lesson, 5 or 6 years
Mhm.
ago or whatever. So I love that you brought that up. It is so true. So
And I share oh, go ahead.
when we're talking about branding, what are some things that you think what are some takeaways like people listening to this can institute? Now, maybe they're not in a media setting already, but what are some ways, even in just, I don't know, it could be as simple as in a BNI setting, like a networking meeting or like a local chamber meeting, or when they're talking to like at an event or an association, like certain things where it's just maybe plain, it seems plain Jane, but there's got to be little ways of tricks that you've got figured out that
Totally.
help them get their branding kind of known.
Yeah, and first of all, I love that you bring up BNI too, because I am a BNI member, and that was something very new to me. And I'm like, how am I going to? I'm in this group with a lot of people that are really in the corporate world. I'm the only alternative medicine person in this group, right? And BNI, for those who don't know, it means Business Networking International. It is the largest international referring group in the world. And, you know, going into a room and just even sharing what I do, because a lot of people don't even know what or and I want to say a lot. There could be a number of people that don't know what alternative medicine is or complementary alternative medicine. They might think it is connected to medicine and or holistic. What does holistic mean? So it's really being intentional when you are walking in a room, any room, the room, Zoom room, podcasting room, whatever the conversation is where I'm going, is that you have a very clear message that you're sharing, right? And the message, you need to have a number of messages, actually. There are times that I talk about stress management. There are times where I have catchphrases that people know me for, be kind to your mind, trauma to triumph, brain candy. And many of these brands many of the things I have are also trademarked. You know, you want that to be part of, I'm not saying you have to do trademarking, but with the podcast, Holistically Speaking is trademarked. Um, and even if there aren't trademarked sayings or you can't trademark phrases, really, some things you can, but the idea is that you want to be extremely intentional when you share the message to where it's like an elevator pitch, right? That when you're sharing and you're showing up that way too, you mentioned that it might be a logo or a brand name and colors. Oh, Lindsay, it still is. Like my main brand color is take a wild guess.
I'm going to say a beautiful yellow and pink.
So the golden yellow color that I'm wearing right now is my primary. It's my backdrop for a lot of things. It's in my logo. And then I have like the three other secondary shades, one being like an offset of a pink or a purple, right? So that's I want people to think about that. I want people to choose happy when they see me. When I walk in a room, they feel something. And I also feel that there is an authority that comes with that, a credibility. And anytime I share any message, whether, like I said, it's about stress management or havening techniques or hug it out or be kind to your mind or brain candy, anything like that, people identify that with the Holistically Speaking brand. And Hilary Russo, by the way,
Mhm.
right?
And I think what really is important that, and I haven't really studied the psychology of it other than from my sales background. I think
Mhm.
it creates a safe feeling for people when our brain recognizes something. When we recognize something, it's like when we recognize someone we know, our brain acknowledges that this is safe
That's
because
right.
we know this. So when we see you wearing these colors, or we hear you talking, and then we go look at your podcast and the logo matches you, it reminds us of you. It creates this like loop in our brain
Mhm.
that also it makes you a trust person, like somebody I trust, because
Yeah.
now I recognize you. And so that's
Yeah.
why I think what you're saying is wearing your brand, being your brand, embodying your brand, everywhere you go and when you're doing your meetings and so on. That's
It's living it. It's and I mean living the brand and embodying the brand, like you said, in the most authentic way. Like if I'm not living what I'm sharing, then I am not showing up authentically.
Mhm.
And it's more than just the branding of the logo and the colors and like you said, but that's how I walk in the room. I walk in with my core values. I know what they are. It's part of what I share even with my clients. I have them work on that in a very strategic way, and I do that too. Everything I'm sharing with people, whether I'm on stage, on a podcast, on television, or one to one with a client, is very intentional because I'm showing up in the same way. I'm never going to ask somebody to do something unless I'm willing to do it myself.
Okay, so let's talk about that because this is something that people get stuck on is
Mhm.
speaking about what they do. This is a big pain point I see a lot with all business owners. It's like being able to articulate their message in a way that they feel safe mentioning it. They don't want to come across feeling spammy or salesy. They get clunky. They start to do all that worrying about what other people think of them and all that jazz. Let's give them, do you have like a framework? I imagine being in media, you're used to speaking quickly and having to put things together in sound bites, is so to speak. Do you have a framework that people could use to talk about themselves on the fly? And maybe like, for example, one of the things, it's funny I mentioned rodeo queening. I really don't talk about that part of my life very often, but
Right.
we would do like impromptu questions. We would have a framework for our answer. And so is there some sort of like a bank of like you've created these pillars? That's what I'm trying to say. We could
Mhm.
really
Yeah.
so you have pillars of things that you could pull from on the fly and then you can sandwich it in a soundbite. Like how can people get better at articulating themselves and their brand in an everyday setting?
That's a great question, and I've had to work on that myself. Like, I've taken numerous courses to learn how to fine tune my message, to brand, to become trauma informed, to get out of our own heads, because this is the big one. Because as practitioners, it feels icky sometimes to sell because a lot of people in the holistic space are truly empaths and in other space as well. But I only know the space I'm in. And the idea of selling, health sounds kind of icky. So you need to find that balance between allowing yourself to be the practitioner, allowing yourself to be a powerful business owner, and allow yourself to also be a student of learning, right? And when you have those three as a student, a business person, and a practitioner or coach, right? Not everyone's a practitioner, then you are in this trifecta that is truly going to propel you forward. Because I had a coach once when I was feeling that, like, oh, I got to sell myself. I'm like trying to sell emotional well being. This is weird. And he said to me, you have two choices. You can be of service and share your message to help others heal themselves, or you can keep that message to yourself and be a disservice. That hit me. I do not want to be a disservice to anyone. And here I am talking about my voice and my connection being my superpowers and like changing my whole umbrella of my business under the media business to also share this mental health side of my business. How in the world would I not want to use my voice and my connection to others to share? So it's on me to be a service to people so that I can help them on their healing journey, right? That's where you have to think about it. Like, do you want to be a service or do you want to be a disservice? And much of that comes with getting out of your own head, putting aside the ego, and being comfortable knowing that there are people out there that need you and want you and need support and guidance. That's the lesson right there.
Yeah, so powerful. And it's accepting the fact that you have to take money for that sometimes in order to sustain
Yeah.
yourself so that you can help more people. And I think that is where also it's like I imagine feeling that way too. And when you're talking to somebody who's lost both of my parents and I've gone through trauma in my life. I could imagine
Mm.
being on the other side, seeing somebody in pain with my heart on my sleeve, wanting to help them however I could and feeling weird about saying, I can help you, but I'm going to charge you for it. Like I can totally experience that feeling and understand why
Mhm.
people get hung up on that. But I also understand the business side of it and that we want to be good stewards to our business so that we can make a larger impact. So it is, you're right. It's about finding that balance. Very well said.
Yeah. And being okay, and not even just being okay, being a rock star, confident in the fact that you have a gift that is designed to be shared with this world. And look, this is the age of coaches online, right? We are almost overwhelmed and infiltrated with coaching, coaching, coaching. It's That's where the intention comes in and the authenticity of who you are, because that's the world we live in. We live in this digital age, and it's also just if you're someone that's seeking out coaching or seeking out someone to support you who's a practitioner, really know what you need. And I'm on that journey too. Like I'm looking for certain holistic practitioners to support me in some areas of my own health, because the best coaches have coaches and the best practitioners have practitioners, right? So if I just stopped my learning with a couple LMNOPs after my name, whatever I'm certified in, what good am I doing? I'm not continuing to learn. I'm not learning how to take care of my own body and my own health. And those are how people align with you, because they see that you're doing the work, but also you're here to support them as well on their journey. It might be a different journey,
Yes.
but you have the tools and you have the experience that you're proud to share and be of service to others.
Yes. Wow, that is so good. I literally have, I can't explain it. It's like a cascade of really just it's love. Just
Yeah.
flowing through me right now. This conversation is so powerful. And I know that people listening are going to feel that as well. So, is there, now that we've helped them with the mindset piece, I wanted to circle back a little bit to BNI because if you've been in BNI, you know that they put you through a really awesome training, right? That I referenced the training I've gotten from BNI, and I was only in BNI for a year back when I lived in Arizona, and where I live now, the nearest BNI meeting is like 2 hours away. So I don't participate because you have to show
Mhm.
up all the time and it snows and I don't know if I make it all the time.
Right.
But the trainings they have are so fantastic. But one of the things that it aligns with our conversation, they teach you like when we walk into, and I see this a lot too on a podcast when I interview with people and I'll say like, well, what are you good at, what do you want to talk about, and they want to like spaghetti approach, talk about anything and everything, or
Mhm.
they're rapid firing, you can find me on the website and Facebook and this and that and that, and it's too much information. So what BNI teaches is to think of one character, one human that you want to ask for a referral for that day,
Mhm.
very
Mhm.
specific. So I like how that kind of modality aligns with what you were saying about your kind of branded sayings and what your
Mhm.
how you tailor your conversation. Can you elaborate on that and maybe how people can leverage the way you kind of do it, maybe with the same concepts at BNI so that they can articulate themselves? Like, how do you break that down?
Yeah. So if I'm in a BNI meeting, a lot of times I do think about what do I want to talk about this week, right? Like right now, it's we have our meetings normally on Thursdays or every Thursday, and I think, how am I going to share my 45 seconds? Because you get 45 seconds, kind of like that elevator pitch, right? To let people know what I'm looking for, or where I need a referral, or the areas. Can anyone help me in this area? That's really what it's about. And what I do a lot is I think of what's the last client I helped? What's the last struggle that we might have gone through? Where did I see a breakthrough? Where am I seeing more of my clientele coming from? That becomes your niche, the people that you're helping most. And where do I want to branch out? So a lot of that that's where I go. I'll pick one thing to talk about because you can go all over the place if you start just talking about your business and just it's not really just pitching your business. They know you. You're part of their group. They already know what you do, but it's sharing different ways that you can elevate your business because it's like that they talk about a perfect example would be if there was maybe uh, a massage therapist or chiropractor, which we have in our group, and aligning with them because then you're co-collaborating. I can bring you clients, and maybe you have clients that are not able to come to the chiropractor because they're scared to get in the chair. Let me help them by doing a little havening and get them out of their head, right? And a little CPR for the amygdala, we call it, and then bring them back to you. And maybe you have a new client in chiropractic care, you know? Or if you're looking to expand into different areas, I'm looking for more moms that want to work with their kids to give them social emotional learning tools and self regulation. So you're being very intentional about this is what I need. This is how I want to build this practice. If you know people, it's a referral back to you as well. So building your collective of like minds is a really important thing. And like when I have guests on my podcasts all the time, there are other practitioners doing their work. I don't know how to do what they do. It's outside my scope of practice. So if I trust who they are just to have them on my show, I'll probably have them as a referral too. Oh, you need to. I had a great podcast episode going back to what we talked about before, and you need to listen because she's amazing. And I would totally use her as well or him as well. Right. So it's really building your collective of people and if it is in the BNI group, it's pulling from those core values, right? We have a number of core values. It's the building relationships, it's the lifelong learning, the accountability, positive affirmations and thoughts, and on and on. And again, I think it always comes back to intention, Lindsay.
I do.
Like, what's your why? What's your why?
Well, and see, unfortunately, I think in business, and this isn't just with practitioners, I've worked with a lot of different types of business owners. We run into that where it's like, oh, I need to serve everybody. I can help. I do weight loss. I can help anybody, but I like to work with moms. Okay. What I'm hearing you say, and I want to highlight the way you worded it. Like you could have said, I'm an alternative wellness practitioner and I have the let's see. So I've got the hug it out method and I help people overcome trauma. Like it could have just been very generic, right?
Very generic.
But
Right.
you were very specific. I'm looking for moms with children that have, like you very much described an exact scenario. What's cool when you do that, and for those of you listening, I want you to think back to what she said, how it created a picture in your mind of somebody you might know. Like it helps for you to go, oh, I know somebody who could use you. Like it's easier for
Mhm.
me to refer you to somebody
Right.
versus like, I don't know people who've gone through trauma. People don't just walk around talking about trauma. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
but
And
if
it's scary,
yeah,
right?
right.
But quite frankly, we all have trauma. There's big traumas and little traumas. You stub your toe, that's a trauma to your toe. So, like, I know we're in this world of like, I help moms eat better, or, there's a lot of those, I help this, I support this, and we're seeing all over social media. Well, for me, it's like, I support purpose driven professionals to turn their traumas into triumphs through holistic health, healing, and humor. Or I support midlife women to self-regulate with neuroscience-based tools that are like CPR for the amygdala. Like I have a number of different ones. I change them up a lot. It just depends on what I'm going in to share,
Yeah.
right? I help children put the power of emotional well-being back in their own hands with havening, right? So, and people will be like, "What's that? What do you mean self-emotional
Very
tool?" I'm curious. I'm curious. The
well.
curiosity is there.
It does. And it also you like that whole amygdala CPR thing, like it helps
Yeah.
to create a visual of what havening might be about
Hmm.
without even you having to define it. I've never heard of havening, right? So to me, that's a whole new thing. But like, oh, it's like CPR for the amygdala. Walking
There
into it,
you
I'm
go.
gonna walk into your
Yeah.
conversation with a little bit more confidence, like not feeling like I don't even know what you're talking about. People, if they don't feel safe, they go away. So it creates that like
Right.
connection and they're like, oh, now I'm curious. They're leaning in, they want to know more. That is a great way to build a conversation with people. Fantastic job explaining that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I can't take the credit for creating a CPR for the amygdala. We use that within the Havening community. But again, it goes back to less than 1,000 people are practitioners of this. I'm one of the first 150 in the country. I am someone that's probably more the vocal people talking about it. And to give people a visual and let them know what it's all about. And like, I didn't know what it was about when I first heard about it. I was Haven for the first time in a bar in New York City with a girl that was with the Havening company, still is in the organization. And she said, "Can I show you how it works?" And I was like, "Bring it on, sister." And she was Havening me in the bar. I love telling the story. And she said, "May I touch you?" And I said, "Sure. I'm curious. I'm a holistic health coach. I'm always looking for possibility of modalities to bring into my practice." And she took my hand and she told me to just think of something that brings me joy. And we went into the whole process of just how to do a really simple havening session or experience. And I was like, "I don't know what you did to me, but I want more of it." And that led me onto the havening, the track to where I am today, and things are really like, this is my thing. This is what people know me for. This is what I get asked to be on podcasts and television, and people come to me in my area because I'm the only one here that does it, and I take that very seriously, to be handed something that's a gift to give back to people.
Right.
It is a gift.
It is indeed.
It's a gift I wish I had 20 years ago or 10 years ago,
Yeah. That it's true. I understand 100%. Yeah. That's how I
Mm.
feel as a business consultant. Like, this is my
Yeah.
way. God gave me these gifts. I thought about being like, if I could go back to school and start over, I would do something in the holistic space. But I have a family and I'm like, I have these gifts. I can serve people in this space and help them bless others. Like, this is what I meant. This is it. This is what I meant for. It's
Right.
awareness. It's so cool. This
And
is
you don't own it, right? You don't own it. Like, anything you have that you give is a gift that you're giving. And what they do with it is their choice. After it leaves your hands or out your mouth and it's in the hands of others, it's theirs to use or not use. And look, I have people that are like, "What's this? What is this you do? What is havening? What is hug it out?" I give the gift and then I release it. If they want more of it and they want to work with me or they want to have another conversation, great. And of course, I do it with intention. And again, it comes back to honesty, integrity, and love are like my first three core values. The authenticity, resiliency, and yearning are the other three. And it is really being intentional and honest, because don't forget, you're behind that. So it goes back to, I do havening myself every day, numerous times a day. I'm self-havening to self-regulate. And that's a gift I want to share with people because I don't own it. And once they have it, it's a life changer.
Yeah. Oh man, I want to know more about it, but we'll have to talk about that time because we're running out of time. So, where can people connect with you? Let's just say if they want to know more about this havening technique.
Sure. They can connect with me at hilaryrusso.com, just one L, two S's, HILARYRUSSO /havening if they're curious and finding about havening, and also my hug it out method, which is, if you want to heal, it really needs to start with the humor that we have for ourselves, the little stories, like you said, the lessons that we learn from life's experiences. It's the humor, understanding, and gratitude. It's an acronym. You need to hug it out with yourself before you can do it with anyone else in the world. And once you start there with that humor, understanding, gratitude, it changes everything. And havening's part of that.
Well, I know it works because just in this short time talking to you, I feel lighter and more joyful. And I had no idea what any of this was even before we talked. So, this is fantastic and a testament of what you do and the energy you bring. So,
Oh,
fantastic.
thank you. Well, it's showing up, right? It's just showing up. So yeah, hilaryrusso.com, or you can find me anywhere on any of the social media platforms as Hilary Russo.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay. Well,
Thanks, Lindsay.
speaking of hugging it out, I'm grateful you joined and shared your humor with us and your beautiful soul. So, thank you so much.
Thank you.